Good morning on this Sunday, May 15th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Democrats in Georgia are strategizing how to keep abortions legal if the U.S. Supreme Court strikes down Roe v. Wade. Also, a Forsyth County man questions whether some 13,000 registered voters there should be allowed to cast ballots. And Georgia could soon be home to another massive electric vehicle plant that would bring thousands of new jobs. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Martha are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
9 days until primary election day, but more than 300,000 Georgians have already cast ballots. In the governor's race, former Senator David Perdue is trying to force incumbent Brian Kemp into a runoff as the governor continues his bill signings across the state.
Congratulations, everybody. Great work. Good job.
Governor Brian Kemp visited Blue Ridge, Georgia to sign what he called a historic state budget that includes another raise for teachers and a tax cut for Georgians.
We put over $1 billion of your money back where it belongs, in your pocket. And on top of that, we temporarily halted the state gas tax and created the largest tax cut in state history.
Meanwhile, his main Republican opponent, former Senator David Perdue, made a stop in Paulding County as he kept up the attacks against the incumbent.
We have a governor that basically sold us out in the election. He sold us out in terms of our personal safety, our schools.
To talk about, so I want to get right to this. Phil, in an internal memo that the AJC got a hold of, the Perdue campaign says that they see the numbers for early votes and they feel that they could force Kemp into a runoff. The poll numbers and the fundraising numbers say otherwise.
Well, I think that is the goal of the Perdue campaign, is that force Governor Kemp into a runoff, and then hopefully they could prevail in June. I think that when Insider Advantage was tracking, we discussed this last week, the race is tightening, and Perdue numbers have come up. How much? We do not know. That's the big question. I think Governor Kemp is probably hovering right around 50%. He certainly is bombarding the airwaves with his ads and totally outgunning Perdue in this case. I did hear that $1.5 million is being poured in with 9 days to go into the pro-Perdue PACs. But at this point, you probably would have to give the governor the edge. And yes, that early vote is very interesting, including in rural counties. The 9th district and the 14th district are the most conservative Republican districts in the state, and they're heavy early voting.
Theron, what does it say about Perdue's $500,000 personal investment in his campaign?
Well, I think he's got to give more than that. I mean, he's got it. I mean, clearly he's done very well for himself, and I'm not going to success shame him for making a lot of money, but I think the thing you listen to what Phil just said is that have these PACs really kicked in. You know, you got to buy that television weeks in advance. You got to secure those radio spots very early on. You got to buy digital now. And so I think he'll give more than this $500,000. I wouldn't be surprised in the next few days that David Perdue is going to probably give himself millions of dollars. But what you're seeing from Governor Kemp is what we talked about on this show. We knew that he was going to have these bill signings. He's going all around the state. And he got through the debates. He didn't do anything to hurt himself. And so I agree with Phil. I think that unless David Perdue and Trump does something pretty out of the ordinary and really change the sort of tone and tenor of this race, I think Governor Kemp will win the primary. Well,
there were two kind of big news events or news announcements this week, and that was Governor Kemp got the endorsement of Speaker Ralston, and also that the former Vice President Mike Pence is coming to Georgia the day before the primary. Martha, what does that say?
Well, it's the cavalcade of those kinds of endorsements. Also, lots of governors are coming to campaign for Governor Kemp. And again, we knew all that, you know, that this would be happening, but seeing it is pretty impactful. And I think that, look, I think the Perdue camp is certainly worried. Of course, they believe that they have a path because they think that the voter turnout is huge. But the voter turnout for me shows that people are back to normal. They want to be out in person doing things. They want to get out and vote. So, look, I still think it's advantage Kemp. I wrote about that this week, and I think that there's going to be continuing announcements. There's been economic development announcements every day. Procter & Gamble's coming. We've got another electric truck company. So this is what the power of the incumbency allows you to do.
Melita, what does this say about the divide in the Republican Party? Because as Martha mentioned, we have governors coming: Doug Ducey of Arizona, Pete Ricketts of Nebraska, and also the former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who tweeted back at Trump that, you may call me a rhino, but maybe rhino, the R in rhino means re-elected.
Yes. Well, and you also have 137 Republicans in the Georgia General Assembly, and about 130 of them are backing Brian Kemp. That's a very telling number. And I think you also have to look at the fact that if Perdue believed in his own campaign, he would have kicked that money up and into his campaign long before now. He's been outspent by Burke Jones, who gave $2 million to his own campaign, Jake Evans, $700,000, Dr. Rich McCormick, $400,000, and Mike Collins, $500,000. So Perdue hasn't demonstrated he believes in his own campaign.
Phil, does that $500,000 number say anything?
No, I think a lot of it, and Theron and I have talked about, or anybody involved in campaigns knows, turnout is the key. Yes, TV is super important, digital, everything Theron said, I agree with. He's run campaigns. I've been involved in campaigns in the past. But I do think that when you look at, again, emphasize that early rural turnout, after the 26 counties of Metro Atlanta, which I would say is Kemp country, the rest is Trump country, and you might assume Perdue country, Burt Jones country, and the rest of the. So it's going to be interesting to see if rural Georgia turns out. That's why I say the race is tightening in a lot of these primary races.
Well, let's talk about the turnout. Melita, back to you. According to GeorgiaVotes.com, turnout is up more than 200% compared to 4 years ago, much of that on the Republican side. So what do you attribute that to?
Well, I believe that there's a lot of Democratic crossover to vote in the Republican primary, but I also believe that because acquiring an absentee ballot is harder under the new laws, and because the vote drop-off boxes which were very popular in 2020, are not available except indoors during early voting hours this time, more people are showing up to vote in person.
Theron, or Melita. Martha.
Yeah, look, that was a one-off. We know that the drop boxes were a one-off. They were there because of the pandemic. Everybody getting an application for an absentee ballot was because of the pandemic. So you're going to see more of going back to how people vote. Now, this huge turnout, though, I think says to people who want to get out. They want to get out and they want to vote. But I had one of my fun data crunchers crunch the numbers in the 10th, the 14th, and the 7th, and and the 9th. And what they saw was roughly about 7% Democrats crossing over and pulling Republican ballots. And that is traditional because in those districts also you have county commission seats that may not have opposition. You have things like that. And they want to have a voice on who their county commissioner is going to be if there might not be a Democratic opponent.
Well, Theron, all of this while Stacey Abrams just kind of sits back and watching, probably with her popcorn, just taking in the entertainment between these two.
Well, she's eating popcorn, but she's also drinking a lot of water because I think that this is going to be a sprint and a marathon on May 25th. And so if you look at what she did recently to temporarily suspend her campaign to raise money for pro-choice candidates, pro-choice groups who are electing pro-choice candidates, I think that was a really good move. And it also showed you, we got a report this week that she's raised over $20 million, has spent 12 of that million on digital advertisement and TV and radio, and still has $8 million on hand. And so I think that she won't have a problem as far as raising money, but the burn rate is very high. Phil and I have talked about
very high.
But I think this is what I would say. She has not been on the ballot in 4 years. Now, while she's been doing great work internationally and nationally and locally to keep her name in the press, she has not been on the ballot. And the last thing she's doing is that she's got to continue to define herself now, because the amount of money that's going to be put into Georgia to lie and distort her record, to make up things about her, she's got to make sure that the people of Georgia really, truly know how she is as a candidate.
Well, you're right to say the locally last, because her focus has not been on Georgia for the last 3 years. Maybe for the last 6 to 8 months it's been on Georgia again. Well, I think the burn rate is alarming, that with no opposition she has spent $12 million. That is amazing to me.
No, but the thing is, though, Martha, you fail to realize is that she's been a Georgia resident all this time. So and like Herschel Walker, your boy, who didn't even live in Georgia, whose wife illegally voted in Georgia, who just came back from Texas. That's the difference. But I think, no, she knows that this race is not also about her. She knows that she needs to actually get the Democratic participation up on down ballot races too. And so again, I'm not uncomfortable about the burn rate, because I think that she has displayed that she can raise money at a very, very high rate. But I think what you're going to really pay attention to is that what's going to be the burn rate come the months of May and June. And I think she feels that the race is tightening against her, because right now the Republicans are the only ones.
She's polling under what she did in 2018.
I did have to laugh there, and though that only 25 people showed up the other day at her event in Savannah, so I don't know if she's connecting very well.
Yeah.
Well, they revised it. They revised it. Oh, okay. They had to find 100 other people.
No, the photographs, the photographic evidence showed more like 100.
I agree with Martha.
We're
She
gonna
has
leave
not
it
been
there.
focusing on Georgia.
Okay, we're leaving it there, folks. Coming up, Democrats look for ways to keep abortion legal after leak of the Roe v. Wade draft decision by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Democrats in Georgia are looking at all options of trying to keep abortions legal after the leak of the U.S. Supreme Court draft decision on Roe v. Wade. Melita, I'll go over to you first. There is an interesting angle here that dates back to a 1903 Georgia Supreme Court case involving privacy rights.
Yes, it involved the use of a photograph in an insurance ad, and a section of Georgia law that corporate attorneys now know well, because every ad that a corporation runs relies on this. And Steve Sadlow used this case to overturn in 1998 the Georgia sodomy law. And he believes that there are direct parallels between this case and the challenges that groups will use to challenge the Georgia abortion law in a state court challenge rather than a federal court challenge if and when Roe is overturned. And that might be a good opportunity for everybody to take a step back and look at some of the things that were not anticipated in Roe v. Wade being overturned, such as the economic impact of corporations who are now looking at the difference between how abortion laws in different states impact the employee benefits they give their employees, or college enrollments. There are a lot of women who will not be sending their college-age daughters to states where they can't get an abortion or day after contraception.
Phil, obviously this is going to be one of the main issues going forward. I'll go to Phil first.
Well, you can get lawyers on the other side of that that argue no. What this boils down to, the bottom line is, this is a case of the states and states doing this policy like was done before 1973 in terms of abortion, or judges just making this stuff up, and that's the argument against Roe v. Wade. Abortion's not going to end in this country. That's the myth that's been spread by a lot of Democrats and some in the media. It would be going back to the states, and then you would have the state legislatures just before 1973 was done do abortion policies. And I think that this is going to be the key. You know, there's restrictions in Roe v. Wade. A lot of people don't even realize that. What the Democrats did in the Senate the other day was very radical. They actually were in favor of abortion right up to the date of birth, and I don't think that's where the large majority of the American people are.
I got it. Martha.
Look, and full disclosure, I'm the interim executive director for the Georgia Life Alliance. And first of all, we've got a lot of new precedent as it relates to COVID, where there were federal mandates related to health care that mostly all were struck down. Okay, and so we've got that new set of case law. But there's no banning of the day after the contraceptive. There's no, National Right to Life does not take a position about contraceptives. They do not think women should be arrested. Abortion will not be illegal in Georgia if the heartbeat bill goes into place. So we've got to really tell the truth about what it is and not just look at what's going to make people the most upset.
Theron.
One of the things I thought was very interesting this week is that you had a lot of attorneys sort of in the media, and Josh Battlefonte, who's a well-respected Republican attorney, sort of really, I think, was factual and agreed with what State Senator Jen Jordan, who's running for Attorney General, she is in a contested primary. But, you know, Georgia has some of the strongest protective rights in place. And so to Melita's point, who did a phenomenal job of explaining this, did a way better job than I could have ever done of explaining how this 1903 decision plays an impact. I would just warn Democrats in this, is that we better be prepared for a brutal fight. I mean, because the attack on women's rights is going to basically be the preeminent issue that's coming up for our elections. And so we not only got to elect more pro-choice candidates, we got to make sure they're well funded, and these organizations need to be empowered.
Quickly, Martha.
Real quick point. To your point, the thing that the Life movement did 20 years ago is they started focusing on electing pro-life state legislatures because they saw where this was going. So 50 years from now, when we're looking back at this, that's going to be the pivotal decision that led to this.
All right, I got to move on. I know y'all discussed that in depth last week as well. But under Georgia's new voting law, a Forsyth County man has filed a challenge questioning the eligibility of more than 13,000 voters in his home county. We can discuss the premise of this complaint, but I want to debate the bigger picture here because could we see similar complaints all over the state, Phil?
Yes, I think it's a great thing that the new law allows people to just complain to the State Board of Elections. You've heard me say on this broadcast that in my own state house district that was represented by Deborah Silcox, they found over 1,000 people that were illegally voting out of district. And it took a long time to try to get that to the fore. This speeds things up, and then let the chips fall where they may. Let's see what the decisions are.
Melita.
But last night, the Forsyth County Elections Board unilaterally dismissed that challenge. They also looked at another challenge by the same citizen who was challenging 580 names, and they only allowed 10 of those challenges to stand. And so if people are going to challenge, they need to have their paperwork properly in order.
All right, why don't we move on? A Fox 5 I-Team investigation by Dale Russell this week involved Labor Commissioner candidate Bruce Thompson. He's accused of using more than $30,000 from his Georgia Senate campaign to pay for his Labor Commissioner's race. Now, the law says you can't do that. Martha, this is a down ballot race, so will this matter?
You know, it could matter, but I think that because it's a down ballot race, and it really doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat, I think people, if they've made their mind up, they've made their mind up, and they're going to either vote with an incumbent or not. This is an open seat, so I think that it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I don't think it matters in the long run.
Phil, this is on the Republican side. Does it matter?
Right, yeah, I am a rare disagreement with Martha. I think a lot of people are looking at the Labor Department, and it was scandal-ridden. You remember Mark Butler, the current commissioner, is not running again because he totally mismanaged the office during the pandemic. Mike Cohn is a very strong challenger to Bruce Thompson, and Republicans are paying attention, and so I think this helps the Mike Cohn campaign.
Well, and I just want to add that Mark Butler is stepping down also because his wife has cancer, so he made that personal announcement. Melita, a big race to watch because of what's happened with unemployment benefits.
Absolutely. And I think this former state senator has demonstrated sort of a disregard for the rules and with some of his behavior around COVID when it first happened. So it'll be very interesting to see what the voters think of him.
All right. Well, coming up, another massive economic development announcement could be in the works before the May primary. We'll discuss its impact on the governor's race next.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
The AJC is reporting this week the largest economic development project in Georgia could be announced before the May primary. And we just had the massive Rivian announcement, and now the AJC says Kia's parent company could build a massive electric vehicle plant near Savannah with plans to hire more than 8,000 people. The issue here is the tax breaks also offered to lure these types of plants, and that's what a lot of opponents to these big corporate announcements say. Phil.
Well, first of all, I think we all have to admit, as we see the electric vehicle industry is really going to be the wave of the future. It's still in its infancy, of course. Hats off to Pat Wilson, the Economic Development Commissioner of the state, and his team. I think transparency, though, is also very important. We've talked about that with the Rivian plant and now with this latest announcement. But I think there's a lot of excitement when you talk about job growth, but we need to know more about the tax breaks. I think that's very important.
Theron, while unemployment may be low right now, it won't always be this way. So is this a way for the state to really ensure job growth and sustainability?
It's a good way to balance it, but you know, we also got to give a shout out to President Biden. I mean, we're talking about these new jobs that's coming. No, I mean, it's in an article. You laugh.
He had nothing to do with this.
No, he had a lot to do with that. I mean, it's been reported that he's been in contact and having a lot of conversations with South Korea about looking at ways that we can actually bring these jobs to Georgia. But you don't want to give the president any credit because you're just on an all-out mission to
No, I don't, because he's driving the country into the dirt.
But should we give, Melita, should we give credit to Governor Kemp?
To both. because the Hyundai announcement will be made both during President Biden's South Korea visit next week and also an announcement in Georgia. So that this is a bipartisan issue, economic development, and both sides have contributed to bringing this plant here.
And it checks off another county that's going to have economic development in the last 4 years. I mean, if you look at that map that they put out, Pat Wilson's office puts out, I think there's about a handful of counties that hasn't had some kind of economic development that's come to them. And that's another promise kept by Governor Kemp, that he was going to do development outside of the metropolitan area and into some of these rural counties.
And quickly, this is a site that they've been working to find the right industry to fit for many, many years.
It is a good site, but I will say that the Biden inflation is not going to help any of us here in Georgia or the other 49 states. That's a huge issue. I didn't know if you knew that, but inflation is a huge issue.
All right, but you know viewers don't like us to talk national, so let's bring it home to Atlanta.
But you got to get a president.
Atlanta rapper Young Thug was arrested Monday in Buckhead and was among 28 people listed in an 88-page indictment filed in Fulton County Superior Court. They're in all of this in an effort to crack down on gang activity.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big win for the Fulton County DA, the sheriff, the Atlanta Police Department, the mayor. I mean, all these entities have come together to really look at, a problem that exists not only just in Atlanta, but it exists all across the state of Georgia, and it is that we have a gang problem. And so I think that this is not the end of it. You're going to see these investigations continue to grow in counties other than Fulton County. But ultimately, if these mostly men, maybe some women, are doing bad things and killing people and participating in gang activity, we need to get those people off the streets. And they do deserve their day in court. But ultimately, I mean, I think that the DA and the Atlanta Police Department and the judges took their time with this investigation. This has been ongoing for a while, and so we'll see what happens.
And Martha, I think it also shows how state and local, as Theron had mentioned, state and local work together, Republicans and Democrats, on an issue this bad.
Well, and there's a commitment that's happened again over the last number of years where Governor Kemp gave, talked about anti-gang task force, worked with the Attorney General on it. I mean, so there's a lot of players here that have worked together on this. Phil.
I agree. Just one quick comment. Obviously, I've been talking about gang warfare and the gangs for the last 10 years. Finally, the Republicans and Governor Kemp did the tools that had this work and these mass arrests work. I just want people to know that. Yeah. The liberal Democrats didn't help us at all.
Yeah, but you got to give Mayor Dickens some credit too. I
will. I think it's great now. But the tools are there.
But I think that this mayor, because it's a part of his comprehensive public safety sort of plan, you had to get the gang problem under control. And you got to give the DA a lot of credit, but Mayor Dickens has instructed his department to make sure that they are laser-like focused.
The DA is driving this. I want to give Fani Willis credit.
I wanted to say that. I mean, DA Fani Willis is front and center on this issue, Melita.
She's a busy lady.
And some of this behavior goes back to 2013. So the election of DA Fani Willis, who's taking this problem seriously and putting the paperwork together to bring this case to fruition, she deserves a lot of credit because her predecessor didn't do that kind of work.
All right, thanks everybody. Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
I want to give a quick shout out to Judy and Blair Craig. They watch us every single week. I met them on Mother's Day, and they were just a sweet, sweet couple. So thank you for watching. Phil, take it away.
Well, I want to make as a winner Congressman David Scott. He's up for re-election, but he's also chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. And when the Democrats in the House did their $40 billion Ukraine aid package, and some of that went to the farmers of Ukraine, Scott worked across the aisle with Republicans and said, wait a minute, we're for helping Ukraine. How about the American farmers? And of course, agriculture is our #1 industry here in this state. And he got shot down by the Democratic leadership, but I want to commend him for trying to do a bipartisan effort to at least get $1 billion for our American farmers. We didn't get anything. Secondly, Fox 5 reported on this just the other day, the Brand Hill complex in DeKalb County. They had 6 shootings last Sunday, 4 fatalities. It's going to be on the DeKalb County agenda. It's past time that this was condemned and that the people are relocated. It's controlled by a Somali gang, and it's something that should never happen.
I got to leave room for everybody else. Theron.
You done?
I'm done.
All All right, first winner is going to be the Gathering Spot in the Greenwood Bank. Huge announcement made this week. This black-owned bank with this black-owned company. Ryan Wilson is a good friend of mine. It's a great gathering spot for professionals to gather all across the country. Also want to give a big shout out to Microsoft. They announced their Atlantic Yards open, and so Cornelius Parker is a good friend of mine. He watches the show religiously, so he actually was the first employee there, and he got it done. And also Dr. Lisa Cook, who was confirmed this week by the Board of Governors at the Federal Reserve, making her the first black woman to serve in this position.
All right, Melita.
My winner is Fulton District Attorney Fonnie Willis, and my loser is the Liberty County Sheriff's Department for their questionable stop of a bus carrying the Delaware State University women's lacrosse team. There will be lawsuits. There will be a Justice Department investigation. Both of these demonstrate how important it is to vote in local elections.
And Martha, I'm going to you last because you can see the clock.
I can see the clock. Winners, the voters getting out to vote. I'm so excited about that. But we lost somebody this week, Lynn Lancaster. She and her husband own Lancaster Music in Gainesville. It's a third-generation business. But they had such a great story. They provided the pianos for the White House through Clinton, Obama, and Bush. And John Ashcroft played hymns on the 15th of September, and all the cabinet members sang along, and that was because they donated a piano for that to happen. So we'll miss you, Lynn, and I know Joey's going to miss you too.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Make it a great week. We will see you again next week. Bye-bye.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program